Today's video tutorial is going to focus on workflow, specifically when using Alfred. So for those unfamiliar, Alfred is a very popular Mac utility app. Among other things, we can bring it up, we can load specific files, we can visit a specific URL, we can work with iTunes, and we can also, through extensions, do things like run shell scripts. So what we're going to do in this lesson is figure out how we can create some boilerplate projects. So you know that especially when you're learning, many times you just want to set up a quick project. So maybe you're learning Backbone, for example, and you just want to pull in an index.html file, maybe any of the dependencies that are required, like backbone and underscore or jQuery. And many times you do this manually, but I'm going to show you how we can turn this into a one-click process. All right, so let's get started. First things first, this is not a paid tutorial for Alfred. It just happens to be one of the most popular tools for Mac, so I'm hoping that most of you will have Alfred and the Power Pack installed. Once you do, you're going to bring up Alfred and browse to extensions. So now you can see we can do everything from running workflows, creating new search filters. In our case, we want to run a shell script, and this shell script will take care of setting up our project. But before we get into this, let's set up our boilerplate project. So I'm going to browse to my home directory, and within here, I'm going to create a new folder for templates, and this will be any templates that I can imagine generating. So we'll create that, and I'm going to drag it into my code editor. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a new folder for Backbone, like so. All right, so now within this Backbone project, we need to create a handful of folders. And you know what, why don't I exit out of here and reopen with the new root, like so. All right, so let's get started by creating an assets directory, and within it, I know I'm going to want a CSS folder. Next, let's also create within the assets folder a JS directory, and also within this JS directory, because we're working with Backbone, I want to have folders for my models, my views, and libraries, and that's fine for this lesson. So we'll bring in the libraries. And now if we expand this, you can see we've added that. Let's add just a couple more for the models and one for the views. And I also want to create a scripts.js file. So assets.js, scripts.js. There we go. And now we can close all of these. Now within the scripts.js file, I want to have some boilerplate code to get us started. So we will simply start with a self-executing anonymous function, and I will use strict. So next, I would like to create an index.html file, and let's paste in a snippet of code here. Doctype HTML, and also meta char set equals UTF-8. All right, so now we have this file, but because I know this will be for Backbone specifically, let's go ahead and bring in any scripts that we need. So we will go into assets.js libs, and I'll begin by bringing in jQuery, which we haven't added yet. Keep that in mind. We're going to fetch that dynamically. And then we'll do it 3 more times. The next one we want is underscore. These are dependencies, or underscore is at least, of Backbone. Next, I'll bring in Backbone, and finally, we're going to get the ball rolling with that scripts.js file. And of course, this is assuming that we're not using something like require.js. This will be a very basic form of a Backbone project. All right, so that looks good. We've set up our index file. We need to create, of course, a style.css file. Once again, we're not using a preprocessor here, but you certainly can if you want. And now that looks fairly good. So I've set up my directories. The only thing that I haven't done here is brought in the libraries. And the reason why is because if I manually paste in the latest version of Backbone, well then every time I create a new project, it's possible that I'm going to be using an outdated version of that project. So I want to make sure that I'm always grabbing the latest official release. And we will do that from the command line. All right, so now that looks good. The next step is we're going to create a new extension, and we will call this Create Backbone Project, created by Jeffrey Way. You don't need to know anything about Alfred. We're just running some shell scripts. So once again, we'll call it Create Backbone Project, create the starting template for a BB project. Next, the keyword is going to be when I pull up Alfred, what keyword do I want to type to bring up this option? I'm going to call it Create. Or you could call it BB, either works. Next, we have these options silent. This will mean run in the background. It's not going to use terminal. If that's unchecked, it's going to bring up the terminal for your shell scripts. But we don't want to do that. We don't need to see it, so we're going to keep that as silent. So the first thing is I will save this. And now when I bring up Alfred and I type create, notice we have this new option here. But we need to be able to specify what the name of the project will be, or what is the folder name going to be called. So we would add that here, something like Learning Backbone. So that argument will then be represented by query right here. So the first thing we'll do is cd into the desktop directory. And now let's make a new directory of query. So now when we run create project and we do something like learning, that will then be the directory name and will be referenced by this variable. So we are simply switching directories to the desktop. We're making a new directory equal to what we ever specify. And the final thing is let's cd into that directory. So let's save that and run that alone. So create a new project. We're going to call it BB. And if we did everything right, and I close these out, now we have this new BB directory on our desktop. Good. All right, so that's the first step. Let's continue on. The next thing I want to do is copy that template directory that we created into this new folder. And we can do that in Bash using the cp command. But I want to make sure that I copy recursively. So I'm going to type -r. So now we're going to browse to that templates directory. We called it Backbone, and we want to copy that entire thing to the current directory. So I will use a period to represent that. So let's save it and try that out, one step at a time. That creates the BB directory. Now you'll notice that it copied that full directory in, and we have it, but really I don't want that Backbone directory, I just want the contents. So let's change this to a /. I'll delete it and try it one more time, BB. Now if I open it, you'll see that we just have the contents of the template we created. So we have our libraries, the models, the script file that gets us started. So already this is very helpful. But now I want to dynamically pull in the latest versions of our libraries. If I switch back over to Chrome and we visit backbonejs.org, we can pull in the development version or the production version. Really, as long as you're using a good build tool, it really doesn't matter. You can stick with the development version. That's perfectly fine because everything will be concatenated in the end. But assuming that you're not doing that, we will use the production version. So now we're not going to hot link to this URL. Instead, we're going to download this locally. And that way also, when you're on a plane and things like that, you can still work on your projects. So if I switch back over, and let's try this out first in the terminal. So I will bring up iterm, and I will cd to the desktop. And now if I simply run curl and I paste in that URL, that's going to fetch that file and echo it out. But that's really not what we want. Instead, I want to output that file. So if I run curl-o for output and I paste that in, now you'll see it's downloading that file. And if I list the files, we do have backbone.js, and we can confirm that by running cat on it. And yes, now we have saved that. But what if we want to save it to a specific directory? Well, maybe we make a directory called JS. Well, now I can run curl. I will leave off the output. And this is an easy way where we can simply take the output of that command and run it through to another file. So I will take that and put it into js/script.js. And now if I cd into the JS directory, I list the files, and I run cat on script.js. Now we have done that as we would hope. Good. So now let's add this to Alfred. Curl. I'm going to paste in that link, and we're going to run that into assets.js libs backbone.js, like that. So let's save that and run it again. Create a project, call it BB. I'll hide this, and now we open it up, assets.js libs, and now we have a new Backbone file and the latest version, which is 0.9.2. Or you could reference the GitHub version as well. It's just up to what you need. All right, so now it's just a matter of rinse and repeat. The URL for underscore, as it's built by the same team, is going to be about the same. So we can change this like so. And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Let's search for underscore. Let's grab it, and I probably just typed something wrong. The production version, yeah, I'm sorry, underscore js.org. So once again, I switch back, and we do the same thing. Assets, JS, libs, underscore dot JS. And if it's easier for you, you can say pull in underscore. You can use comments using the £, pull in backbone, begin with our template. So the next one I want to do is pull in jQuery. So I know that URL is code.jQuery.com/jQuery.js. And once again, bring that into libs.jQuery.js. Good, so let's save that, and one more time, we're going to run it. Create a project called BB, open that up into our assets, into our, JS folder, into the libs, and now we have the latest version of Backbone, jQuery, and underscore. And what's nice about this is rather than hard coding it, every time you create a new Backbone project, even if these libraries and frameworks have been updated, you will still get the latest version. So now at this point, we've copied over our template. We've pulled in Backbone, we've pulled in underscore, we've pulled in jQuery. The final thing I want to do is open up this directory in Sublime Text. And we can do that fairly easily. If I run to Applications, Sublime Text, Contents, Shared Support, into the bin, you'll see that we have this SUBL, which stands for Sublime. So I simply want to grab that, and that's what we're going to use to open the current file. So I will exit out of this because we no longer need it. And now I'm going to paste that in, and we are going to open the current directory represented by a period. All right, so if we did everything correctly, this should work just fine. Create a new project, BB Learning. It creates that directory structure, and now we have a fresh new project to get started with. We already have our libraries, we have our models and views, and then we can go into scripts.js and we can get started. And that took a total of about 4 or 5 seconds. And that is very cool. Now, hopefully future projects like Yeoman will remove the need for something like what we've outlined in this video, and I hope it does. But until then, it only takes a moment or two to create these new shell script extensions directly within Alfred. And that'll do it for today. I am your host, Jeffrey Way, and for more of the best web development tutorials and screencasts, always visit NetTuts.